Welcome in, everyone. My name is Penn Center, aka Brian, and we are joined with our co-host Zach, aka E to the 2I Pi. And today, what are we on? We are season 2, episode 3.
That's right.
Of Beyond the Blackboard. Super exciting. We're going to be talking a little bit about consolidation today. Zach, how have you been? I've heard that life has been accelerating.
Life has been accelerating, and there's just so much. My kids and Mrs. Pi and all of them are just they're crazy busy, and we live a pretty, I'd say, simple life. We don't have like a ton of activities after school or anything like that, but I still feel like we're just so busy. It doesn't take very much to keep us busy. And
yeah, how many kids do you have again, Zach?
So I have 5, and we are just I mean, they range from, I'd say. So the way I like to describe it in sort of a tongue-in-cheek way is I have kids who know what 6'7" is, and then I have kids who don't even know how to say 6'7". Okay, that's the tongue-in-cheek way. and there's the whole gamut there.
Right. So it's quite a spread of different ages, is what I'm hearing.
That's right. There's a spread, and it's pretty fun to. When you have family activities, you have to really think differently. So we have a tradition in our family where we'll watch family films. And so I have to be very careful how we select these, because they've got to be interesting for, say, a middle schooler, but also interesting for, say, like a 3-year-old, right? Like you have to sort of gauge this interest. And it's we've done a pretty good job, I think, in our family of doing that, but it can get pretty tough. So
how do you find their attention? Like if you don't choose the right kind of medium, do you find that their attentions will kind of wander or something like that, and chaos
in a way,
ensues?
or more likely what they'll do is they'll just go play with something else. They literally just run to the other room and go play. They'll grab some of their toys from another room, and there you
well, that's good. That means they're self-sufficient enough and self-aware enough that they can just go do that, right? Which is nice.
Right, exactly. They're like, I'm bored. I'm just going to go do something else. It's totally fine. That's what they want to do. How about you, Penn? How are you? And
things I hear you on things getting really busy. So we were just chatting about how I was getting all my work loading done for my faculties, trying to submit our first template. So now that's with the scheduling process. They're going to schedule all of our days and rooms, and then I have to come back probably next month and fix tweak it all and make sure there's no major conflicts and stuff like that. So but that's nice. So that's done. That's one of the big jobs that I have to do as department chair, is get everyone's workload ready for the next academic year. And then I guess the other big thing that's happening right now is we're getting all of our summer courses kind of ready to go. So we do distance education courses, so a self-paced style of course. So just kind of trying to figure that. We haven't updated those courses in 15 years, Zach. So I'm trying to ask the department that controls those if we have some money to update them. So that's probably what I'll be doing over March. Is you'll probably actually see me doing some videos on Twitch, doing some mathematics education. So stuff I would normally teach to future teachers.
Get excited! That sounds exciting. I will definitely be there as much as I can. That's
I'm super excited for that. It's a content that I think is very near and dear to both of our hearts. So I'm very excited to look at that again.
Yeah. No, good. I'm glad to hear that. That sounds awesome. Cool. I think so. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, we've been using this book right here. I'll share Beyond, or I can't even say it. Building Thinking Classrooms. Here it is. This is our book that we like to talk about each week, and we're not going in order because some chapters are more interesting to discuss than others. There are some that are like how to rearrange the room, which I think we'll talk about another time. Or there are other ones that that make sense to talk about at different times. But we're not taking these in any particular order, I guess I should say.
You don't want to talk about what VNPSs are all right for a whole session?
We might, but I mean, in today's technology environments, we should have it's like the iPad S's. I don't know how to call it, but the Windows Surface S's, or I don't know.
Oh, well, I think it's going to be important for us to eventually talk about things like artificial intelligence. So we might have an episode where we talk about some of these things, right? Like what are the benefits and drawbacks of each of these different mediums that we could use in the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's where, with like taking this book and sort of applying it in 2026, like what does it mean for us now? That's sort of the approach we're taking with it. So how do we work with the tools that are here? We've also got some other books we're going to probably introduce in season 3. Actually, one of them might get some love today because it was explicitly mentioned in our chapter, which is super fun. If you saw Smith and Stein, there's some stuff coming up soon with the 5 practices that we may do something in season 3. We'll see. But for now, I would like to discuss this concept of consolidation, because that's the key phrase that is used throughout this chapter. And before we talk about consolidation, we need to talk about, again, the way we see classrooms today. When you talk about today's classroom, what often happens, he does a lot of research here, and there's action research, which is very different than just like the traditional, you have a control and an experiment, but you're just like making changes and you're trying to see what happens, right? This is a lot of action research does this.
And I think before you go on, it's important to preface that it's really challenging to do what we would consider gold standard research in a classroom because of the just varying dynamics that happen to be in that room, right?
So this is, I think, research,
That's why you see action research more often, I think, in the classroom.
Well, in social science research in general, this is more education in general, not just math, but like literacy and other things. A lot of the social science research, in some ways, is dubious by design. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but like a lot of times you have so many external factors that can affect something that cause research to be taken with a grain of salt by itself. Like any individual study is not going to make a significant enough difference without replication and without like other sort of like, you need more information than just a single study. It's just like anything, when you take a point of measurement, that point of measurement is only going to tell you something about that group. You need to generalize, you need a whole body of research to be able to say, like with any conclusive associative power, that this is, yes, exactly how we should do things. And frankly, like you look at a lot of research, there's a lot out there that contradicts itself, right? Like you see results, they're like, okay, well, you see this happened in this group, this happened in this group. How do I reconcile the differences here? And hence why you have a lot of the math wars that go on. That you get these people that are in their own camps and in their own like philosophical mindsets, and that you end up arguing with each other over really nothing because you're like, well, we actually do speak the same language, but we might just disagree on some particulars.
There's a couple things I've found out in my travels through math education. Exactly, like I agree with you 100%. Quite often we're saying the same thing just with different phrases or different terminology. That's one big thing that I've noticed. The second big thing is there tends to be the big fights, like, and it's not a fight, but like the big discussion points tend to be very like either local or global in nature. So I think there's a group of people that are like, these are the global things that we should all be doing that are going to affect outcomes of our students. Whereas I think somebody like Liljedahl would say, well, let's focus locally in the particular classroom with this particular cohort, do the research that we need. So you've almost kind of moved research from out here to a very like localized setting happening with the students and with the teacher, and then you go through this iterative process locally to get the results that you're looking for.
Well, and then there's this need to try and push that more global. So once you see something success happen in a local environment, there's a desire to push out to more global things. And so like it gets, and then there's like the notion of standardization, which another episode I'd love to discuss is like, how do we standardize things? Like, or should we standardize at all? These are questions of like testing and like curriculum and so on. What kind of standards, if any, should exist? And that would be another fascinating discussion, because I think there's a lot. This is where you get a lot of opinions, and you might even get political on this, depending on your views. So this topic can get very, very tricky to handle. But anyway, we're here to chat about what Liljedahl has observed. And then we're going to we'll go from there. What caught my attention in reading this was this concept that Alan Schoenfeld discusses from 1985. I actually had a really hard time finding this reference, but I actually found it through another paper of Liljedahl's from 2019 that he actually published in a journal. So that's actually, so the way I found this particular reference is that way. And the concept was leveling to the top. And I was like, what the heck does that even mean? Like, I don't even understand what it means.
Exactly. That was so funny. I read it and I was like, that was the very first thing I wrote down. I was like, what does this mean?
Right.
And then I think he does a better job of explaining it, but that gives me a laugh. Yeah.
It gives me a laugh. Well, it did. At first, I was like, I don't understand what you mean by leveling to the top. And I've noticed that, like, his phraseology at times, I'm like, I haven't, like, I get what you're saying, but I don't know what that, like, the way you phrased that was sort of different.
Yeah, or like the one verb that he had to describe over in the corner. I was like, what is this word?
Yeah,
reifying. I was like, what?
Yeah. So in preparation for this, I was reviewing. I learned some SAT words and GRE words, right? Like the standardized test words that they like to throw at you. To reify is you make something actually like tangible. To make something that is an idea, something that you can understand. Right, like that's something that you're going from abstract to concrete.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right? So anyway, this concept of leveling to the top. The way I like to think of it is, you as a teacher may have this goal, right? Let's just say it is to be able to, so students will complete the square, right? Mm-hmm. And they'll be able to complete the square on any trinomial that I give them. And there's this algorithm you may have in mind where you take your quadratic, you divide your b term by 2, et cetera, et cetera. You go down the whole list of procedures. Like I already know all that, right? And what Liljedahl or what Schoenfeld talks about as leveling to the top is saying, okay, you give them a task on completing the square. They, no matter what the students do, you're just going to take your time, let the students work on the task. And at the end of the task, you're going to tell them exactly the steps that you did that are like perfect, right? The gold standard thing you should do. And you're going to present that as if it's the law, nothing else matters. I'm just going to present that and assume that all the kids can follow what I just said, right?
Right.
So
there's a really cool quote. I'm going to try to find it while you're talking.
Go ahead. No, it's fine. I'll give you a second. I don't know if you know where it is, but anyway, I'll keep talking because I have something else to say here, unless you're ready. And I see.
No, I have to find. I'll find it in a couple seconds. Give me a moment.
Okay.
Here.
Anyway, so.
Oh no! I totally found it.
Okay, I sort of figured. I was just waiting for a moment because I figured you'd have it.
I put a big star beside it. I thought this was a cool quote. Liljedahl says, students mistake being shown how to do it for learning, and they mistake having it in their notes for knowledge. I thought that was a cool quote.
That's right. I saw that. I think I underlined the same thing. That reminds me of some of the thoughts. We'll talk about that later. But
hi, Sean. Welcome in. Trust me, nobody needs the quadratic formula in life and compulsory high school. True.
I mean... I think I see your point, Sean, and I will say we may have differing opinions there, but I can agree in some spirit with what you're saying. Like there's something about the mechanicness of going through the quadratic formula that just feels sort of rote, right? And I think that's sort of the point of this building thinking classroom anyway, is to try and get the roteness out. So So leveling to the top is basically bringing everyone to your understanding right away so that I can just end the lesson and say you all learned, right? Yay, you all learned. I brought you to my level. And when in reality, what happens is if you look at your class, some people are going to be with you, right? There are going to be some that can hang with you and be like, okay, I follow what he's saying or she's saying, and I'm good to go. Others are going to be like, huh? What was that? Like, I have no idea what just happened. And some are going to be like looking at their friends and being like, hey, what did that guy just say? Like, what did Zach just say? What did Dr. Coverstone just say, right? Like, what the heck, if this were me in the classroom, what did Dr. Coverstone say? and they're going to look at their friend and try and get notes, and then they'll try and make some meaning out of it. There's going to be some gradation in between all of those descriptions, right? The class is much more mixed and.
But I can see what you're saying. Like what you're kind of implying is like there's going to be some students here that are going to be able to follow that leveling to the top, but some students are going to end up kind of naturally doing this, right? So that gap between students is going to grow potentially with this method, right?
Exactly. Whereas, and this sounds really bad, just like when I said this out loud, and when I say this out loud, it makes me cringe because the natural opposite here is to level to the bottom. Which sounds like what you're doing is making everyone like the least common denominator, right? Like you're trying to say, oh, well, everyone is not getting it, so I have to make an assumption that everybody doesn't get this. And in some ways, that assumption is good because you're trying to pick what leveling to the bottom is saying, I want to pick the strategy that everyone understands. If I start there, then the class can start at some common ground. And then gradually, as we go through the lesson, we're going to get more increasingly valid strategies. At first, that sounds like I'm just making everyone the same. And what I'm doing is I'm finding common ground. And the subtle distinction, I think, is important. I'm not trying to lower the standard because ultimately, let's just say my goal is to complete the square. I may start with a strategy that's less refined, but that everyone can understand, or use numbers that are more reasonable at first, right? Like I might use quote-unquote easy numbers to help students get some common ground. But then as I continue moving along in the discussion, I want to get more and more sophisticated procedures, ultimately coming to a conclusion where I get to an abstract procedure that works for all quadratics, right? I want to get there.
Zach,
right?
Like when you hear the word leveling, like so when I hear like level to the top or level to the bottom,
right?
To me that feels like a very like teacher-driven, like direct instruction kind of procedure. Do you feel like similarly to how I view that, or do you view it a little bit differently?
I think it's more about how you're perceiving it's where you perceive students are, right? You want to find, you're leveling I don't see it as I'm trying to frame your question. Like I sort of get your question, and it's sort of hard for me to pin down how I want to say this. I'll try and re-say what I said, and maybe that will prompt a better question. I don't know.
And maybe it'll help to have some context here. Like I'm trying to figure out the difference between level and consolidate, because those feel like different things to me.
So I'm going to contextualize this in completing the square. Okay, like I said, I think this is a good example that most can wrap their head around if you're like in math education in high schools. This is something you'd see, right? And we can use other examples for those who maybe are in elementary or middle school just to give you a sense of what this looks like. So in the high school, you might say, all right, I'm going to complete the square on an already perfect square, right? X squared plus 6x plus 9. That's a good perfect square. That's x plus 3 quantity squared, right? I might start with a strategy that works for something that is already a perfect square, right? I might start with an explanation that works for something in that context. But then as I continue to go through and I might give another problem that's very similar, that's already a perfect square. But then I might change something. I'd say, okay, now how do I handle a square where it's not perfect, like x squared plus 6x plus 10? You have an extra piece that wasn't in the x plus 3 quantity squared. Right. The explanation that gets to that adds a step, adds something extra, changes something in some way from the original perfect square that already existed, right? There is this leveling that occurs that my explanation has to be a little bit more intricate in order to handle the case where I have x squared plus 6x plus 10 versus an already perfect square, right?
Right, and you're saying like leveling is like bringing the students up to where you want that to be, right?
That's right. I ultimately want them to take any random quadratic I throw at them, say like 2x squared minus 5x plus 9 halves. And like I give them something like that and they can hang with me, right? Like they know what to do. They can work with that. Ultimately that might be my goal, is to do something like that. But that's hard, but I have to somehow help them. And this is where scaffolding comes in. This is where I think lots of educators would agree. In order to achieve that ultimate standard we have, we need them to have graded experiences, leveled experiences, right? And what we're doing in the classroom is we're helping pave that road. We as the teacher are to help pave the road so that the student can get from the most elementary strategy to a larger strategy, something that's like more useful, more general, right?
Right.
Another good example here that's mentioned in the text is maybe more friendly for those who are elementary teachers. The general strategy for adding two-digit numbers. The way he talks about it, he says, well, what if we start by adding just tens? Let's just take a two-digit number and add tens. Like, actually, not even do that. Just take tens, like something like 20 plus 30, and add those together. Do we know how to do that? The answer is yes, okay? Then what if I change a ones digit? What happens? Keep the other ones digit as 0, but change the ones digit to a 4, right? And so you have this number string that he has in the book. And then maybe I change the ones digits so that there's no regrouping. So maybe there's like a 4 and a 5, right? And so that total is 9, so I don't have to regroup it all. But then ultimately, I want my students to be able to regroup. I need to build up that strategy. And ultimately, when I add two-digit numbers in general, I'm going to need to regroup. So as I start scaffolding these problems ahead of time, I'm thinking about how are students going to think about adding two-digit numbers. I think that's another really useful example to think about, to get in your head, what does it mean to level? And so the explanations that come from students, that's from the teacher point of view. We're also talking about the strategies that the students will use, so that if a student uses a pictorial strategy, maybe to do something, and it's not very abstract, it's very concrete in nature. From a student perspective, that is something that many students might do. They might go and try to use concrete manipulatives to solve the problem. And then some students may use more very abstract and number-based reasoning where they're using symbols to represent numbers, right? And that is a more advanced or abstract kind of reasoning. We may need to build from concrete to abstract, and that leveling also matters. So there's like two kinds going on. When you design the task, you have the level of difficulty built in, but you also, as the teacher, are taking the strategies the students give and leveling those as well. So does that clarify?
I think that helps a lot, because like when you had said like level to the bottom, that felt different to me than consolidate from the bottom, which is I think what you're talking about, where you start here and you kind of work your way upwards to the level that you're hoping to achieve, right?
And I think that phrasing is better, in my humble opinion, to consolidate from the bottom. I wonder if that's where,
because leveling feels like we're kind of like we're just expecting this level, right?
We're going to drag you through the mud no matter which way you're going. Like, we're not going to help you through it. We're just going to drag you through it. And that doesn't feel very great, charitable, to say the least.
Right, and I think it also like disparages some students who feel comfortable with a different method of attack for the particular question they're working on too.
Yeah, it invalidates, and that's the thing, is we want students to ultimately connect their reasoning to something more helpful for them that works in generality. We don't want to just give them a strategy that we came up with, and that may or may not make sense.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
In that same breath, if you're thinking to yourself, that's a lot of work, you're absolutely right. That is a lot of work. Like, I make no bones about it. Like, this is a much harder way to teach. It is much simpler to go and say, I'm going to level to the top every day, and then just go tutor people one-on-one. That may or may not work depending on your context. I don't know. But in my experience, I've seen that hasn't worked very well when you have large class sizes like what you have in the public schools. We would have already, and Liljedahl makes this point, but I've said this a lot too, that if it had worked to just level to the top every day, we would have seen a lot of different results by now. Like we would have everyone perfectly mathematically educated, and we wouldn't have any of these debates at all. As a matter of fact, I think we would have had a lot. AI would have taken over. I'd go a step further. AI would have probably solved this problem already.
Now that's a place where I'm going to push back a little bit, because I actually wrote down that I thought that was a straw man argument.
Okay, fair enough. I want to hear it.
Now, I firmly believe that every human being has some kind of natural variation in their mathematical abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just basic statistics. So that's why I thought this was a straw man argument. I understand what he's trying to say. I think he's trying to say that if this was successful, then we would probably see like the average or the median tend to increase over time.
Mm-hmm.
I think he goes a little bit too far in saying everyone would just be, in the 99th percentile. Like, I think that's a little extreme for me.
Yeah. Well,
but I fundamentally understand what he's trying to say.
Right. I think we disagree on maybe, like, there are those that I think naturally struggle. I am among them. Right. I'm thinking of myself in all of this, because if it worked to level to the top, grad school would have been super easy. I would have just understood everything that my professor said. It wasn't easy. Like I would sit there in functional analysis and I'd be wondering, like, what the heck is a normed linear operator? Like, why am I having to study Banach spaces? Like, what the heck is a Banach space, and why do we care? And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheekly because I understand better now, but like I sort of don't. If I don't understand like my professor did, and there's this process we go through that I've learned things, but I don't feel that I've really like learned it as much as my professor told me I should learn it, right? Like if it were to be something that I could just pick up, my professor should have been able to help me understand those things, and just almost learning by osmosis would work. And maybe I wouldn't have a perfect understanding, but I'd have a better understanding. And like I feel like there were times where I would sit in class, and I sincerely apologize to my professors if you're watching this, but there were times where I would sit in classes and I just didn't know what to do. Like I would be doing exactly what was described here. I'd be taking notes for the sake of taking notes. And some of those notebooks sitting in my office are just like empty words on a page, because I would just be like, I have no idea what he's saying. I'm going to try, but I have no idea what's going on. Okay, like I here I am. Like, this is confessions of a math grad student and a PhD. Like I think we have this happen sometimes, right? Like I bet you've had this experience too. It's not like
totally.
Right, like this. We laugh
every time I get together with Sasha. I have this experience.
Right. Well,
every time.
Like, every time. It's not a like what needs to happen. And for me, this is where I feel like I offer something. Like one of my goals in life is to make math more accessible, and what I mean by that is give people on-ramps to understand those normal linear operators, right? Maybe we don't understand it yet, but maybe we can find methods that will help make those ideas more palatable. And like this is something that I think Liljedahl's trying to do. He's trying to solve a problem that exists, which is we need to connect students to math, and he found a way through consolidation, which we're going to get into next, is like on how to connect the students to the math, right? That's one of the big questions that we're trying to answer here. How do I help a student genuinely engage?
Sean says, did you read those goofy white and yellow Springer Verlag texts? Waste of time.
I have a number of them. Not all are bad. Not all are bad, but I do know a thing or two about them.
I appreciate that comment. There were a lot of times when I was like, I have this textbook and I am not opening it because it's very scary.
It is scary. And it's like, I still have some horror stories of one of them. Like, I'm just thinking of a functional analysis class I took where the author was very much European, because I was introduced to notation that only is used in Europe, right? I don't know if you've seen this pen, but I saw closed sets have a backwards parenthesis, and I was like,
"Oh my gosh,
what?
What is that?"
I remember, and I don't mean to disparage these books, but like, or make fun of the author at all. But I remember laughing. I showed this to my to my spouse, and I was just because she's a math teacher at the time. And
Right.
as I was showing this to her, I was just laughing because I'm like, this is the math I have to do in grad school. Can you appreciate that? Like this, I have to somehow make sense of this notation, and it wasn't well defined. It was almost assumed that you knew what was going on.
Right.
Come to find out, funny turnaround on that though. That so Mrs. Pi had a student in one of her classes that was a foreign exchange student that happened to be from Europe. And it turned out that me teaching her what that meant turned out to be practically useful for her algebra classes. It was so funny. Like it worked out for the best. And I was like, that's so crazy. I never thought that would be useful, but like it actually turned out to be helpful to translate across language barriers. Like that's so cool. But all the more reason that we just need to be careful, right? Like it's not that notation's bad. It's just that we need to be careful on how we introduce things. And what symbols mean, and so on.
And I think you said something in there that kind of like sparked something in my brain. It really does feel like when, and I really felt this in upper level bachelor's and into the master's program, where because everything is just being told to you in some sense, the expectation, I guess, like it's almost like the expectation of like the learning process gets offloaded from the teacher onto the student in a very unsupported way. Whereas I think Liljedahl is saying like, yes, we want to be able to foster that ability to like think and learn and process information with the students, but by doing it this particular way in the classroom, you're very much in a support role as the teacher. Whereas I think the leveling to the top is, it just feels like the responsibilities and the way that we offload the process of learning feels very different.
And frankly, like if we're talking about this in a practical 2026 context now, teachers are overburdened. Like I'll be completely blunt. Like that this is a very hard thing to endeavor to do. You have to have a lot of, you don't want to change too much at once. Liljedahl's asking a lot of us as teachers to try and try and do this active work when we're already overburdened with a lot of the menial tasks, the tyranny of what did Mrs. Pi call it? The tyranny of tedium or something like that. Like the way we all the little things we have to do every day, like the paper filing and the going and getting attendance done and so on and so forth. Like these are all things that get in the way sometimes of doing this necessary work that is really what the core of teaching is about anyway.
Right.
Anyway, we can go for a long time. Hello there. Welcome on in.
Snowblower, how's it going? Good afternoon to you as well.
Yeah.
It's 11 a.m. here, so it's still morning. I'm still having my coffee.
We got 7 minutes. 7 minutes. So practically 12. Good to see you.
Anyway, was there anything else in the chapter that you wanted to kind of dance around? I think we've talked about the leveling, the consolidating from the bottom. Maybe how we consolidate from the bottom might be an interesting thing to talk about.
So this is pretty deep, right? Like we have to, again, the concept here, I think, that he's trying to get across, that Liljedahl's trying to get across, is that we want to have a path that where we can have how do I want to say this? Have the simplest solution, the most accessible solution, the one that everyone, and more importantly, the one that everyone knows. You want to start with something that everyone knows and build up to the things that maybe fewer people know. Right? So you want to take the thing that, like using the completing the square example, most people are going to know how to complete the square on an already completed square. What they're not going to know is how to adjust. And so when I talk, or maybe like everyone is doing a strategy using blocks, using algebra tiles, right? And then some people are using a more abstract strategy. Start with the thing everybody's using, whichever of those that is.
Yeah.
Have that be a common ground. and then gradually move up to things that are more rare, right? And that you as the teacher also have a narrative to craft, right? So if my ultimate goal is to complete the square in generality, I need to make sure that the story I tell builds that generality in a logical sequence that's driven by the student work.
Welcome in, Butter, and Moduli. I get it. We all have many accounts for many different things. It's all good, my friend.
Yeah, it's no problem. No problem.
So what I liked in the chapter was this idea of like weaving the story, right? So you as a teacher, as you're monitoring and providing hints or support for various groups to do the task, you're actually formulating how you want to go through that consolidation process, right? So I'm going to pick this from this particular group, and I'm going to pick this from this particular group, and this from this particular group, and you're kind of like almost like going to like an art museum or something, and you're kind of like walking through this museum of student work, right? To develop that story. And I liked how he said, just have your red marker or whatever, and just put a big box around something that you don't want them to erase.
Right. And actually calls it a gallery walk. That's
right,
I love
right.
the art gallery thing here, because that's sort of what you're doing. You're always standing. He even says that standing is good for kids, like that it leads to more thinking if you go and actually walk around it, actually physically move around the gallery, if you will, rather than trying to focus on sitting. And he even explicitly talks about taking pictures, because like you might want to take pictures, and the hesitance there is not that pictures are necessarily bad because you're still driving what your conversation from the work that's on the boards, but that if you're all sitting down, you're less likely to be engaged. So there's this
students are more likely to be on their phones.
Right.
was a big one that he said.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also liked how he said to facilitate the discussion, you're not having a student present their work. You're actually having a student from a different group say, okay, what do you think is happening in this piece of mathematical art, for lack of better words.
Right. What is this artist doing? Right. How do I and how do I connect to that? How do I take what I've learned? That takes more active reasoning. I thought that something occurred to me too reading that section, because what he found was that students who were just telling how they did their work, that was not as engaging as having the other students who weren't in the group try to connect to the work that was on the board. I found that interesting.
That intuitively makes sense, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because it's just like it's the same reason the teacher telling fails. It's actually like something snapped for me this reading. That in reading this, I was like, it's actually the same problem. I hadn't really like fully connected that. But I realized, no, that would make a lot of sense, that if the student does the same thing the teacher was doing, that it would be just as ineffective. That's consistent.
Yeah, exactly, right? Totally. It makes sense. It totally makes sense.
So cool. Yeah, anyway, there's lots that we can say on here. And frankly, like, I have a lot of notes here. I don't know how far you want to go with this, because we can go pretty far, because there's comparisons with another framework that I actually want to engage with season 3, which is Smith and Stein and the 5 practices. And he actually calls this out explicitly and says that what he's proposing is very different. And I wonder if that conversation is more appropriate for season 3, just because then we actually know what the 5 practices are. But there's actually a way of sequencing and selecting and connecting that mirrors what's being done here, and I think it would be useful to have that conversation a little bit later. But I'm okay with having it now if you like. But
no, I mean, personally for me, I haven't read the 5 practices, so I think I'd rather you and I have a discussion about that first, and then we can come back and compare and contrast. So I'm happy reserving that for season 3, absolutely.
But the intentional scaffolding that has to be there, he talks a lot about having the work done up front, and that Smith and Stein will have things done ad hoc. This is one area where I think Smith and Stein has an advantage, because a lot of times we can't anticipate what's going to happen, right? If I give a task, especially for the first time, I don't know what the kids are going to do. if I've never
Right.
experienced it,
Right.
like there's a sense of unknownness. And so he's like, well, you need to take the burden off of doing that ad hoc, of trying to sequence ad hoc and have this all planned in advance, which sometimes is effective, but sometimes can fall flat. And in my experience, when I've implemented a task the first time, I'm like, okay, this is the way the students are going to go. And then I turn out to be horribly wrong. And then I have to sort of I have to do the ad hoc thing anyway. So I tend to lean towards ad hoc methods than the, having everything planned in advance. And
right. I think I remember reading that he says, okay, like what if students don't produce the thing that you're looking for? And he says, well, find the group that's closest to the thing and just give them the hint to put them in the right direction, right? I think that's how he answers that question, if I recall correctly.
Which almost feels, and if I'm going to be critical here, it feels disingenuous to try and force that, right? Like it doesn't feel authentic to me. I'm not sure I'm fully on board with that, because it means I didn't ask the right question to me. And so I need to ask a better question.
The right question to begin with? Or
yeah. Either that, or maybe I did ask a good question, but it didn't elicit what I was going for, and I need to do a better job of helping the students see what I need them to see. Right? That there's something about the way I structured the task that didn't do what I wanted to.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing is, like, if that were to happen, as a teacher, you make a note of that, and then you go back and iteratively maybe redesign that lesson, right, to get a bit closer to what you were hoping to accomplish.
Anyway, so that's that. There's some theory for you about consolidation. So again, the key idea is you want to level to the bottom, not to the top, meaning that we take the most sophisticated strategy and post that last, specifically the one that tends to be the most rare in the classroom, and start with leveling to the bottom, which is the idea of starting with the most common strategy and then using that as a launch point for further discussion in the classroom.
Right.
Now we may not have. Go ahead,
Zach.
You're good. We may not have much to do on this task. I don't know how far we really need to go with this, but let me have to zoom in. Where are you, Ben? I'm on Excalibur. I'm over here, looking for you.
I'm following you, elegant ferret.
Yes, I'm an elegant ferret today. Oh my gosh. So I'm zoomed out trying to find you. And is it just an empty one? Okay, this is new.
It's empty. Yeah,
cool.
I didn't pull up.
I was looking around
one.
for. Okay, if you had pulled up the previous one, I was going to wonder what the.
I can pull the previous one up if you'd like.
No, you're fine. We have someone.
I also didn't know if we wanted to do like what we did with the first task, which was the logarithm task, was we kind of started teching up some stuff. I didn't know if that's what we wanted to do today. Just kind of like grab that tech document and start kind of filling in some of the pieces. I wrote down a couple of items. Let me just double check. There were two things that we wanted to potentially tie up, and that was, how do we bring in the algebra tiles piece in order to potentially help with that hanging constant term, right? That +1 that we were seeing with some of the factoring.
Right.
So I think those are the two things that we were kind of curious about doing.
Okay, so I think if let's talk about the algebra tiles. We may not, like I said, we may not need to do very much today. I don't know that there's like a ton, but let's just talk about briefly some algebra tile work. For those of you who are unfamiliar with algebra tiles, let me show you. So the idea with algebra tiles is, if I can get this to cooperate, you have three kinds of tiles. I'm going to try to recreate these as faithfully as possible, so we can just copy and paste. But we have, let's just make this one, usually have like a red or a green. I often wonder about that.
Different colors?
The color blindness of this. I hope when I designed these, if I had designed these myself, I think I would have used different colors. But I think they have actual symbols on them to help with color blindness issues if there are any. Because usually, anyway, you have, three different kinds of blocks that come in these sets. You have a square block, which we label as x squared. We have a rectangular block, which we label as x, because this is a 1 by x rectangle. And then we have a 1 by 1 rectangle, or square, which we call our unit length. So I'll let you label those, Ben. There you go. All three of these have obverse or reverse sides that are all red. So you can have a negative x squared and a negative x and a negative 1, right?
Yeah.
So here's something I realized. So funny story, Ben. We were talking about this whole task. I don't know if I brought this up with you last time, so forgive me if I've said this before. But my kid, ironically enough, was learning this exact content after our second meeting.
Oh, no
Can you
way.
believe that? It was actually uncanny, because I think it was the night after we had done our podcast. I realized, like, he came to me and said, hey, can you help me with my homework? And needed help with this exact lesson, like literally the exact content that we were trying to design a lesson about. And it was really interesting because we started talking about treating letters as physical objects. And what I realized was we can make we don't even have to use just these algebra tiles. So, for instance, what we did, I'll give an example of what we were trying to do. Right, maybe just to give us something to start off with.
Do you mind just increasing the thickness of this, or maybe I can zoom in a little bit just to make
not
this
at
a
all.
little bit.
Not at all. I will do that.
It'll just make it a bit easier for our viewers to see.
That's great. I will do that. I've got it on max.
Yeah, max 10 worked well for the tiles, so hopefully that'll be good for.
This is what's coming. Hold on. Let's be 4. Why is this not cooperating? 4. Nope. I might need to
technology.
zoom in.
Technology these days, am I right?
Technology is best. You might need to zoom in. I'm actually zoomed out as far as I can. That might be.
I can zoom in. Yeah, that's fine.
Let's zoom in. So let's.
There we go.
So 4.
That works.
2. S. It's like one of those Prezzies, right? Like, have you ever used Prezzies?
Yes. Excalibur is a little bit wonky when it comes to zooming in and out with stuff. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, but you were talking about how this came up with your kids and you were trying to connect this back
one of my
to what
kids
happened.
was working on. That's right. So here's what I said, because I basically used our model, and at the time I was trying to find a physical manipulative. So what I did is I pulled out like spoons and forks.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I pulled out spoons and forks, and I said, okay, I'm going to pull out 2 spoons and 9 forks, or whatever the numbers were, and that's a lot of forks. But imagine that I have these 2 things, and we literally like pull them out, and you know, I don't draw spoons very well, and I don't draw forks very well. So here's my fork. I can't draw forks. Can I do something like this? Can we just copy that? Looks like one of those. Looks like a pitchfork. That'll work.
Yep, we know what you're up to.
We know what I'm up to. So we do this. And basically the way we talked about it was, if I make, this is a group of stuff. I'm going to put these in like a bag or something. Let's just say I have these in a bag, and then I have 4 copies of this thing in a bag, like 4 bags of this stuff. So basically take this, call this a grouping, and multiply by 4.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
That's reasonable, right? Like I can. Then my kid was like, okay, well then I'd have a total of 8 spoons and 36 forks.
Right.
Right. So now I have a physical representation, and I think you asked the question last time, if I'm not mistaken. Well, how do I deal with like negative things? How do I deal with like how do we model that?
Right.
And I thought of something that would work. Let's say this 9 is a negative sign.
Mm-hmm.
What you could do is, you could turn the fork over.
Oh, okay. So you assign
Right?
a direction to it.
I assign it a direction to it because that would be a natural. Like, I don't know how to make an anti-fork, right? Like, here's my best anti-fork, but the idea is, all I'm doing is I'm turning my forks over. So maybe we just do a rotation here. Can we do a rotation on Excalidraw? I think
that's a great question. I don't know if you can easily do a rotation in Excalidraw.
Okay, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do a flip horizontal and a flip vertical.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Take that.
Sweet.
Take that, Excalidraw.
So now we have 9 anti-forks. Yeah.
9 anti-forks. Right, so
just make a fork out of antimatter, shaking my head.
So an anti-fork, I mean, I don't know. Like, I could do them in red. Maybe that's better. Whatever.
It just depends. I think there's value to both, right? There's value to both because red, we're assigning a new color that would be effectively like flipping it over. Rotation also assigns a different orientation. So, like, I think
that's right.
This idea of assigning an orientation makes a lot of sense, and we talk about this a lot when we're working with integers.
That's right. And so this model seemed to help my kid. And it's funny, if I remember the conversation we had correctly, you know how I predicted that once we got to a point where you had a constant, so like this 2s plus, say, like 5 or whatever?
Yep.
This was treated differently by my kid. I was right about this. Okay. Because happened? What happened was, well, I mean, I called this money. I actually did call this like $5. So, like, let's say I have $5. I know how to handle that, right? But what was more interesting is what happens when you have a 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or when you go in reverse. How do you, like, so when I write this all out, this is equal to 8s plus 4, of course, right? But my kid was like having trouble with noting that when I factor out the 4, there's this 1 left over. And so I had to emphasize what this 4 means. If I have $4 and I make 4 groups with 8 things in it, all equally distributed, then I'd have 2 spoons, but I'd have $1 in each group. So I had to emphasize that physical meaning so that the abstract could make sense.
Right. Were they kind of naturally leaning towards dropping the +1? I think that's always the interesting piece of the conversation to me, right?
Right. There's this natural tendency. I don't know why this happens, other than it's like factoring to kids means it's almost like a physical movement, right? Because I moved physically this 4 to the other side, so right, like this thing got physically moved. It's almost like because of that physical movement, well, it had to go somewhere. I can't replace it with anything.
Right.
So this thing feels like it shouldn't exist. And I think that's what's going on. Like, I not that I can really see inside my kid's brain, but I think that's what's going on is that because I physically moved the 4, I didn't physically move the 8. I knew what to replace that with. The 2 makes sense, right? That's a factor. So, like, the conceptually factoring it makes sense, but that I multiply. But if the number that I'm factoring is the same as one of my terms, I have this tendency to not want to replace it with anything because there's a movement that already occurred. It looks like I just moved something.
Do you think it has anything to do with because usually we're thinking about this as students are transitioning from like additive thinking into multiplicative thinking, right? Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's a clash of additive versus multiplicative thinking.
It could be. That's also a possibility. Yeah, I'm speculating too. Like a lot of this, I haven't seen any good research on this particular topic, so I don't know. It would also be interesting to try this one as well.
The backwards one?
Were swapped.
Yeah.
No, but if I swap the order of the terms, we don't usually write it that way because we've been conditioned to write our terms in decreasing degree order. That's sort of just conditioned from tradition, right? It's not wrong to do that, but it just is a tradition that we hold. But if we were to write it the other way, I'm curious if students would be more amenable to writing a 1 here, or if it's consistent no matter where the positioning of the constant is.
Right.
I don't know. These are further experiments I'd be interested in trying. Now, my kid ultimately figured that, so he got his homework done, and he got like I think he got 100 on his homework finally. He finally corrected his errors, but it took a lot of mentoring and doing this explicit modeling to really pin it down. But eventually, so leaning back into our consolidation, at first I needed to bring out the actual physical manipulatives, but ultimately I wanted him to be able to take the physical manipulatives and turn that into abstract reasoning. So we started with something physical, and then we eventually did the abstract algorithm after we had seen enough concrete representations. Right? There's this notion that I needed to help him develop his own strategy, but that it worked for every time.
And to me, this feels like an example of how we were talking about before, this consolidation from the bottom, where you're like, okay, let's start at the base, which in our case is the physical representation of the things, and work our way up towards where we would like to go, that level of being able to write some of this stuff down algebraically.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I really wanted to say today. I don't know if there's any like written document I want to write about this, but I did want to just share this insight from a conversation we had that happened to be relevant to our conversation previously, and that that this consolidation is natural to do. I think this would be like, there's ways to incorporate this naturally, if you're mentoring your kids or if you're doing it in a larger classroom. There are practical ways to do it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's also worthwhile just to quickly go over like how the algebra tiles might be used in this small example of like 8x plus 4.
Sure, yeah.
Just so that our viewers can kind of see that process. Because I think when you're working, go ahead and you can start drawing and copying and pasting to your heart's content there, Zach. As we're working in the forwards direction, you design what we call this area model. So if I have two factors and I want to multiply them together, it's very useful, I guess, to line them up, either one of those factors up horizontally and one of those factors up vertically. When we're working in the backwards direction, which is factoring, you have to start with all of the objects, I think, right? And then kind of figure out how to organize those things to get the area model. Or I think there's a grouping model we can use too, right? Where we assign groups and then you start distributing the objects into groups. So I think there's two different visualizations we can use here, if I recall correctly.
So here's one way to do it, right? We could just put all these together, but I have 4 groups. I was separating them earlier, but we don't have to do that. But I look at each of these groupings, this little thing here. This is one group of 2s plus 4. So take the 2s plus. Wait, did I do that? What am I modeling? 2s plus 1.
I'll write down what I think we got here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 8 x's plus 16. Is that what we have?
Sure. Yeah, we'll go with it. I didn't mean that, but it's fine. So I can write this as the fact that there are 8 groups of x plus 2, right?
Right.
So I can look at this in each row, in each column, I have 8 times x plus 2.
Right, and so I can kind of visualize that and go, okay, well, I can circle each one of these like this, therefore I'm going to have 8 groups in total. That's where this comes from. And in each group, we're going to have an x and a plus 2.
That's right.
Yeah, so I can see that very nicely. What if a student did... Could a student do something like this?
Yes, they could. And that's exactly what I was going to mention, that you could take different grouping sizes. This works really nicely because then you'd have 4 times 2x plus 4. Now that's not the GCF, of course, but it's a start. It gets us. Yeah.
I wonder if anyone would write this down. We could have one group of 8x plus 16. That would be actually pretty cool.
And I might even bring that up depending on my context, right? If there's somebody who did that, I could see somebody.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, there's one group.
Yeah, that's completely reasonable.
I love that.
Right? I think that could be it'd be a smart aleck that would do it.
Totally.
Class, and I would, but I could see myself being snarky enough if I'm with future teachers and I'm in the class doing this task. I would probably do something like that just to be snarky towards the facilitator. But if I'm at the same time, this brings out a point that one is a common factor. But
Right.
as Bit's talking about here, there's also a concept of arbitrariness and convention, right? There is this element, and like Coldgold's talking about, there's reasons why we have this convention. When we talk, for example, about power series, it's useful to talk about power series in some ordered degree form, right? And actually, this one here has the advantage of being able to introduce power series. If you think about 4 times 1 plus 2s, that actually, if we had a power series, you'd have s squared and x cubed and so on.
Right.
This one is more, so there's advantages to doing both. Not that you'd ever say that to a sixth grader necessarily, but
to start talking about power series to grade 6, yeah.
but in some ways you can introduce concepts, and like Bit 101's talking about, the conventions come out as we have these conversations, right? We learn conventionally. We write our variable before constants, and in degrees of decreasing order. That's at least our convention that most books I've seen have followed. I don't know if that's U.S. Central or if that's like international, but I get the feeling this is a pretty common thing internationally.
Yeah, a lot of what I've seen in many textbooks has a decreasing power of the variable rather than an increasing power of the variable.
Mm-hmm. And there's reasons for both. I mean, as Gold was saying, this is having an increasing order could be interesting. That's true too. Like you want to be careful because group theory is you need some abstraction for group theory. But anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about here is just there are ways to integrate in the algebra tiles, and I like the fact that you can still get the multiple pieces of work using different manipulatives. There's different ways to see these.
Yeah, and I think you've actually set this up in an area model that we can utilize as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we actually have x plus 2 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the other way. I typically tend to use the backwards area model a bit more when we're trying to factor trinomials. Mm-hmm. But I can see it here too, right? I can see the x plus 2-ness and the plus 8 up here.
We're just making up adjectives now. X plus 2-ness. I love that. The inherent x plus 2-ness of the array. Yeah. I love that. That's
the array or area model versus the I guess the difference in how I would view the two models, right? Like the grouping model feels very natural for this question because we're just factoring out a constant, I guess. And it doesn't really feel like we need an area model to talk about this, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The smell of 2. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
My man.
That's right. You can perceive numbers. Some
yeah, did you ever just wake up in the morning and you're like, the smell of pie?
Yeah. I do, actually, when there is pie in the oven.
All right, well, I think that's a reasonable place for us to start wrapping up, if you're okay with that, Zach.
Wonderful. I love it. Next time, we're going to pick a new topic. If you want to be here and be a part of that choosing of the new topic, you should be here, and the Wheel of Destiny will spin, and we will find out what new idea we're going to try to develop with everybody. I'm excited because I don't know what we're going to get yet. I get to have
We never know. We always throw a couple of suggestions in, and then we let the audience fill in like the remaining 5 or 6 suggestions. So we never know until that episode exactly what we're going to be talking about, which is super fun.
Right, and it's going to be a hoot because I have some topics that would be fun to play with, and I'm sure Penn does as well. But historically, we never get what we want. We get what the chat wants. Yeah.
Flood the algorithm with math. Yeah.
Well, that's it for my friends. Thank you for being here. For those that are watching us on Twitch, so we're gonna do a clapper board here. Ready, set, break. There's your edit break.
Uh,